Alright, I was thinking to myself that I might as well just do a top 10 worst moments of the Metal Gear Solid series. Because the thing is, about the Metal Gear Solid series, that it's one of those games that really tries to add in as much as possible, but doesn't really think about how adding one scene can really hurt the product as a whole, which is really one of the biggest problems with this series. At number 10, it's gonna be playing as Raiden naked. This was just fucking excessive. I know what the idea was. The idea was to make it so that Raiden would basically have nothing. That he would be forced to rely on stealth and not on any of his contraptions. But honestly, this just felt really excessive. It was uncomforting to me. I know that it wasn't for some other people. It only reinforced a lot of the ideas people had that Raiden was made, oh, just for this little teenage girl demographic. Admittedly, I understand his reason. I don't really hate Raiden in this story. I understand why he's there. And the reason this is so low is because this scenario is actually kind of justified as a section of pure stealth, but it felt way too forced. And number 9 is going to be the introduction of the Cobra unit in Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater. Now, I need to set things up for you. This game was realistic up to this point. And it also seemed really historically accurate. It really seemed like it was trying to fit in that time. All the way up until this point, there was no fantasy elements, nothing ludicrous like there was in any of the other games. And then all at once, they drop all the mystical elements of this entire game, except for like 2, all at once. We get a brief scene of the sorrow, which actually seems really weak unless you get the setup, which is later on. You get kind of a very just sudden introduction to all the Cobra unit, which all of whom are pretty ludicrous in their own way. We get introduced to Volgin, whose vague explanation is better than nothing, but at the same time, he seems really, really out of place in such a realistic scenario. It doesn't help either that a lot of what he's talking about is pretty obscure stuff. And really, the big problem with this is that it's incredibly jarring. And also, just sort of a side note, but the boss's betrayal in this whole thing, it felt kind of weak here. It later worked as sort of a driving force because we kind of got a better idea of how close Snake and the boss were. But here, it just kind of felt weak. And number 8 is going to be the character Vamp. And the reason I say the character is because he has a lot of really weak moments. And I think that really just comes down to the fact that his powers are kind of inconsistent. He can move ridiculously fast in some scenes, but in other scenes he's basically letting you shoot him. There are a lot of moments where you see him basically doing whatever he wants on water, which isn't explained. They show a lot of moments where he's defying time and the laws of physics, never explained. And they also show a couple of moments where he's doing these absurd jumps and climbing up these towers or whatever. Explained, and actually in a way that's good, but everything else just really didn't work. Not only that, I'd also like to say that he felt really unnecessary in Metal Gear Solid 4. It seemed like the only reason he was there was because Raiden was there. And also, I always thought that if Raiden wasn't there, you could have Vamp not there and Rose not there, and you would only have to change a couple of things. And I think that probably would have been for the better. Really, Vamp just clashes too heavily with the mostly realistic setting that this game tries to create. At number 7, okay, there's a setup for this big boss fight. You basically have the Shagohod chasing you throughout all these places. Finally, you have the plan to take him out. And he escapes from this plan. How does he do it? In the stupidest and silly looking way you could possibly think of. He flies out of the water. And I'm not talking like, oh no, it barely just made it through the power. No, that motherfucker flies out. Like, I know it's supposed to be that he dropped his back, but it's not like dropping weight makes you instantly gain a bunch of forward momentum and fly into the air. The thing is, this moment just looked really fucking ludicrous, even in this game. Even though by itself, it doesn't really hurt the game that much. It hurt what was supposed to be a grand boss fight. At this point, it just kind of made the Shagohod and Volgan seem like really silly adversaries at this point. And that's what I think was the worst problem with this. At number 6, it's going to be Liquid living through everything. Okay, I'll admit that him kind of being alive the first time, and maybe the second time, that was kind of like, ooh, but afterwards it just got a little comical. There's no real explanation for any of them except for the first one, and it just felt like, it felt too silly. It felt too ridiculous. And it really contrasted with the realistic setting that was in Metal Gear Solid 1. In Twin Snakes, it's actually not that bad because in the whole game, there's completely ludicrous shit going on all the time because of the way they set up the action scenes. But in Metal Gear Solid 1, where realism was more of a focus, it just looked completely stupid in my opinion. At number 5 is going to be Naomi dying in Metal Gear Solid 4. I could get like 1,000 messages saying, oh no, this was a sad moment, but it just felt fucking pointless. There really was no reason for Naomi to do this. Her justification was just fucking weak, making amends. She's a fucking scientist who has invented a whole bunch of really awesome stuff. Just do something to help normal people. Stop working for people that are fucking crazy. Just do that. And not only that, it really didn't have any good payoff. The idea was that it was, oh no, it was Otacon, another love of Otacon, going away. And I know that's what the idea was, but honestly, it just kind of felt like they were satisfying a quota. And out of all of them, this felt the weakest by far. Even weaker than Sniper Wolves, which honestly was kind of eh. Number 4 is not a moment. But it's the reason most of this list is as bad as they are. It's super realistic padding. It's super realistic exposition, whatever you want to call it. It's people talking for fucking hours on end about how everything here can totally happen in real life. First of all, these start to feel really pointless after a while, after you see some of the ludicrous shit that happens in here, like Psycho Mantis or Vamp. And the other reason these things really suck is that they can get fucking long and fucking boring, as they were in Metal Gear Solid 4 and as they were in Metal Gear Solid 3. And it also kind of just hurts this series as a game. Because there's a pretty big cardinal rule in games. Do, don't show. This is not a fucking movie no matter how much you try to act like it is. The reason this is so high is because this is what makes everything else feel all the more terrible. You could have had Vamp in Metal Gear Solid 2 if it was set up not to necessarily be completely realistic. Because it felt all the more out of place. And that's what really has to do with a lot of these bad moments here. Just this long, unnecessary exposition that I think this series could have done without. Number 3. This is the physics-defying moment of the series. The Shagohod jumping out of the water has fucking nothing on this. Raiden basically jumps in front of this absurdly huge submarine and stops it. I mean, you don't need to know anything about physics to know that this is bullshit. Again, realistic setting, and Raiden actually has a pretty realistic looking suit of armor. It looks like something that would be kind of the mid-ground between, like, a normal person and Iron Man. It looks that way. The main problem with this was supposed to be a very climactic showdown, and it was just too silly. Admittedly, it was already going in that direction when Liquid jumped out of Metal Gear Ray and was laughing his ass off the entire time while a stroked out Snake was just chasing him. But this was like the most ludicrously stupid thing of the Act 4 series. And that's saying quite a lot. Number 2. It says Fortune's New Luck in Metal Gear Solid 2. Okay, before this even happened, they already said it was bullshit. And before this happened, they were already setting it up to be super realistic. So you can imagine how much it really felt out of place and completely ridiculous when Fortune somehow, don't fucking ask me how, blocked what had to be an entire barrage of like 1,000 missiles attacked at Raiden, Solida, and Fortune herself. Yeah, Snake said, oh, she is Lady Luck. Yeah, she had to be the fucking luckiest person in the world for that to happen, because there is no way she did that intentionally. That was a bullshit scene. So, while number 2 was basically the epitome of bullshit moments, Metal Gear, the number 1 moment, the number 1 worst Metal Gear Solid moment for me, is not necessarily bullshit, it's a boring moment. It's unnecessarily long, it feels completely unnecessary, it actually hurts the series as a whole by opening up plot holes, and is also completely bullshit. And that is the debriefing in Metal Gear Solid 4. They reintroduced 2 characters, who, first of all, one comes back from the fucking dead for what has to be the 4th or 3rd time, with what has to be another bullshit explanation. After all that was set up, after all the tension that Snake was about to die, it feels really anticlimactic, because it's just like, what the fuck is going on? And it's not the good type where you're drawn into it. It's more like, oh god, they're gonna bring in some new bullshit at the last second, aren't they? And that's what happened. So much of what happens here ends up really kind of intertwining with a lot of ongoing story arcs that really just don't mesh that well together. Both Big Boss and Zero feel ultimately wasted since they just die within like 10 minutes or 15 minutes of being on screen. And I'm thinking that it's 15 minutes because the thing is, this whole scene felt like to me that it was like an hour because it was so fucking boring. The whole thing just felt so slow. Everything there was just a lot of stuff that you either already knew or that he just told you 2 seconds ago. So much of Big Boss's dialogue in this feels completely redundant, and my biggest problem with all of this is that it keeps trying to act like this is a realistic series. As I said in the fourth worst moment here, that's what this series tries to do all the time. It tries to act realistic. But when you try to keep saying over and over and over again, oh, we're realistic. No, there's no way the human mind can be reproduced. No. It was, nanomachines, just like everything else in this fucking series. Admittedly, I don't really hate this series, but I can't deny that it has horrible habits. And this is fucking one of them. Being super realistic with the ultimate example of trying to be realistic, being this fucking debriefing. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you have your own worst moments, write them down. If you have your own best moments, write those down too, because I'm probably going to cover that soon enough. Woo, 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 you know it.